Dear friends, Jai Bhim Namo Buddhaya. You are listening about Arup Loka from the book 31 Planes of Existence by Venerable Suvarno Mahathera. And in the last video, when you will search about the remaining part of this video, this chapter on Arup Lok or formless realms or the fine immaterial world, then you you see that in Arup Lok form realms or the fine material world in that video, or because this chapter is continuing from the from that part. I am reading this part on formless realms or the immaterial world, continuing with this with another video. So this is the part of that video, but the previous part is in the video on Roop Lok. So let us begin where I left. When we hear the Dham and practice meditation, we will be mindful of the sensuous desires arising from our six sense organs. Sixth sense organ is the mind. In Buddhism, thinking is also considered as sixth organ, sense organ. When we hear the Dham and practice meditation, we will be mindful on the sensuous desires arising from our six sense doors. Once we are mindful, we will know the evil of the concept of I. We will be able to meditate and see rising and falling with clarity. From then on, deep insight will be attained, and hopelessly we may reach the first stage of arhatship, known as Suttapan. We must renounce the wrong view of self and become selfless. However, there is no certainty that anyone will be reborn into the happy planes. Many instances have been documented and talked about by various authorities and ordinary people in what they themselves believe are near-death experiences. They have described what they have seen, which corresponds with other unrelated instances. Description of guardians of the hell realms and tremendous heat there are so similar and experienced in different spans of time and places as to exclude any form of collusion. Many people do not want to hear the realities of the realms of hell because they are fearful of the uncertainties of hell. Is it real or is it superstition? They are full of anxieties and doubts. They choose to ignore the facts, believing in the addict ignorance is bliss, or due to a guilty conscience over dark matters deep in their minds. These are fatalistic people who only see the negative side of any situation. They fall they fail to realize that the beginning of fear can lead to wisdom. The wisdom to stop doing unwholesome actions and start doing good. All beings reap the fruits of the seeds they sow and are given rebirth by and according to their karmic results. No deity of any sort controls the birth and death of any beings. It is only their karmic energies that condition the rebirth of beings. The good or bad karma will determine the happy or suffering planes that they will find rebirth in. Making haste to do good, check your mind for evil. If one is not energetically doing good, one's mind will subconsciously be thinking of evil thoughts. The mind has a tendency to gravitate towards unwholesome thoughts, and if one were to let it alone, it would start looking for dirt. Refrain from evil deeds. Should one be contemplating unwholesome thoughts, now is the time to stop. One should not find pleasure in evil. Brush off even a simple act of evil. Buddha says there will be painful suffering if one does not stop contemplating doing unwholesome deeds. In the process of performing good deeds, the thoughts of evil or unwholesome actions will not enter one's mind. When the merits of one's good deeds ripen, one will enjoy great happiness. A lot of people do not want to believe that there is hell. They want to believe that hell is only a concept. If a person commits any crime, he will be arrested by the authorities and be punished, and that is all there is to it. There is no such thing as atoning for committing bad deeds. When on your that bad, some people may use this excuse to assuage their conscience as an answer and consolation to their sufferings. They will find various reasons for their happiness. They will believe that happiness is what they have achieved on their own. With their achievement and money, they believe they can have what they desire. This happiness in any age and time. One such instance is given in the following paragraph. In the time of Buddha, there were four very wealthy men. They were so rich they did not know what to do with their money, so they decided to use their wealth in the pursuit of sensuous pleasures with women. They would look for beautiful women, marry them, and having become tired of them, would pay them off and get rid of them. If they were not able to marry them, these four men would kidnap and rape them and then pay them off. They were able to get away with their atrocities because of the circle of cinco psychophantic cronies their wealth attracted, who were able to keep them out of trouble if caught by the authorities. Thus, they used their wealth to buy themselves out of trouble in their present lifetime. But how would they possibly fare reaping the results of these unwholesome deeds in their future existence? In the four woeful planes of existence, too, beings have the fine senses. They see, they hear, smell, taste, and touch. However, their faculties can only be conscious of suffering. Their existence in the lower planes has suffering as the sole objective. There is no occasion for happiness, sense of pleasure, recreation, or performance of any deeds that cause happiness. Beings here are also unable to choose to do good, hence, they do not have any opportunities to accumulate merits. Their consciousness is only for suffering. They cannot choose to do one iota of good, they can only suffer. So much suffering that the Buddha said it is hard to find a simile for such suffering in hell. Even so, the Buddha gave the following simile. Suppose bhikkhus men got a robber culprit and presented him to the king, and the king said, "Go and strike the man in the morning with 100 spears." And they struck him in the morning with 100 spears. Finding him still alive in the afternoon, the king ordered that he be struck again with 100 spears, and again in the evening. What do you think, bhikkhus? Would that man experience pain and grief because of being struck with 300 spears? The bhikkhus replied in the affirmative. So too, bhikkhus, the pain and grief that the man would experience because of being struck with the 300 spears does not count beside the suffering of hell. It is not even a fraction. There is no comparison. The Buddha further elaborated one elaborated on just a fraction of the fruits of evil deeds. Now the wardens of hell torture him with a five-fold transfixing. They drive a red-hot iron stake through one hand. They drive a red-hot iron stake through the other hand. They drive a red-hot iron stake through one foot. They drive a red-hot iron stake through the other foot. They drive a red-hot iron stake through his belly. There he feels pain, racking, piercing feelings. Yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of hell throw him down and pair him with excess. There he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings, yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of hell set him with his feet up and his head down and pair him with adzes. There he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings. AIDS. AIDS is, I don't know whether many. It is a heavy hand tool. It's a kind of tool. It's adds. He feels pain, racking, piercing feelings, yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of hell harness him to a chariot and drive him back and forth across burning ground, blazing and glowing. There he feels pain, painful, racking, piercing feelings, yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of hell make him climb up and down a great mound of burning coals, blazing and glowing. There he also feels pain, painful, racking and piercing feelings, yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of hell take him feet up and head down and plunge him into a red hot metal cauldron, burning, blazing, and glowing. He is cooked there in a swirl of froth. as as he is being cooked there in a swirl of froth, he is swept now up, now down, now across. There he feels painful, racking, piercing feelings, yet he does not die so long as that evil action has not exhausted its result. Next, the wardens of the hell throw him into the great hell. Now, as to that great hell, because it has four corners and is built with four doors, one set in each side, walled, walled up with iron and all around, and shut in with an iron roof. Its floor as well is made of iron and heated till it glows with fire. The range is a full 100 leagues, which it covers all pervasively. Yes, hell is very real indeed. It can be linked to a huge furnace, flames shooting out from all sides, including top and bottom. Doors lead to and from this furnace like chambers. There are altogether 8 chambers. The flames are constantly burning, and there is no switch to shut off the flames and the tremendous heat. Lady Sedow, who is known to be very advanced in his practice, says that those beings in heaven have their bones, nerves, flesh, heart, lungs, brains, etc. burning hot, and the skin are so hot that flames shoot out from them. In hell, they will remain for hundreds of thousands of years, even millions of years, or trillions, decillions of years. Decillion is 1 followed by 60 zeros. They are there, they will remain experiencing sufferings. There are many beings in hell, just like mustard seeds packed into a bamboo tube. Because I could tell you in many ways about hell, so much so that it is hard to find a simile for the suffering in hell. Majjhima Nikaya. Thus said the Buddha, the suffering in hell is great indeed, being forewarned by no less a person than the Buddha. We humans have the good fortune to be able to choose our course of action in this present existence, to determine in a big way the degree of happiness or suffering in our future existences. Lady Syada has explained all this very clearly. He further said that among the beings in this world, all have a myriad of a myriad of evil calm in them. We have in us, to a greater or lesser extent, conditioned by actions of previous existences, residues or accumulated defilements of anger, greed, and delusion, and we may not understand the true Dham, as we may not have been in contact with the Buddha Sasana. During our long stay in the hell region, we have been conditioned by many unwholesome characteristics which stay with us in our rebirth in the human existence. Some babies, when they are born, are badly behaved. They cry, for anything. They throw tantrums very often, and even to the extent of throwing away their milk bottles. They need supervision constantly, and they need of attention all the time. Some are really very well behaved and obedient. Why the difference? Those that are unruly have been reborn after a lengthy period in hell, after becoming in hell, after being in hell and in constant sufferings. They have been conditioned accordingly. Human lifespan is between 70 to 100 years compared to the lifespan of the different levels of hell that some beings are freed from due to their good karma ripening. They are now reborn in the human plane. The most important consideration is that we must not succumb to evil actions or deeds, otherwise, we will find ourselves in the hell regions. Once we are in hell, all the unwholesome actions will create the right conditions and opportunities for bad karma to arise. So, evil karma after evil karma will arise. In certain cases, having passed away, one goes to hell. Having then spent away while in hell, one may be reborn again and again in hell or other woeful states for many existences. All our actions and deeds, though unseen by anybody or any agencies, will never escape in the effects of karma. Karma will take us to the many existences that are our just deserts. It has no distinctions or preferences. Our deeds and actions are known by karma and in due season will reward us with what is due. Even kings, emperors, gods, devas, beggars, and humans and all beings are answerable to their karma. Calm is the work you do by it can be mental or it can be physical. In Buddhism, mental work is given more importance. For example, you want to do bad thing, you want to hurt someone, even if you don't hurt you, but if you have thought of this thing, you will this will add to your bad action. You may not get its result as harsh as if you have done that, but to some extent you will get some result, or you can say to some extent it will add to your bad action or bad deed. By the same token, if in our lifetime we have performed wholesome deeds, karma will be responsible to see that good things come to us. Karma will see to it that at the appropriate time, just rewards will come to us in the present life or in lives to come. The right conditions must prevail to reap what we have sown. Lady Sayadaw has said that all the unwholesome deeds done by human beings are mostly due to disillusions we harbor, and these disillusions can only be eradicated by meditation. When we meditate, we will realize the non existence of I, me, you, and mine. Once we have realized that most of the delusions will not arise in us, in which case we will have attained Suttapati, the first step towards our final goal. Once we pass away in this stage, we will not be reborn into any woeful states, and we will assuredly be reborn as a human, not as an ordinary human, but an enlightened, but an enlightened, but an intelligent human. Sansar is a Pali word which means the cycle of existence. It is based on life, death, and rebirth, and the chain of cause and effect. Because we die with desire, aversion, and confusion, we can't let go of life. This tenacity propels us into a new existence according to the quality of our minds at the time of death. This death moment determines the nature of the next existence, and so we may be reborn into a pleasant or unpleasant existence. We are reborn with a pre existing disposition or inclination, which explains why we all have individual characters. Right from birth, the Buddha fully understood the natural way that beings constantly perpetuate, perpetuate, or perpetuate their own sufferings from life to life. He taught that that if we could completely purify the minds of selfish attachment, we would be self liberated and experience the peace and freedom of Nibbana, that is enlightenment, the cessation of suffering, and the end of rebirth, the end of samsara. For to be reborn again and again is to experience untold suffering and misery. For the Buddha asked, which is greater, the tears that we shed from existence to existence while wandering this samsara, crying and weeping from being joined with what is displeasing, being separated from what is pleading, or the waters in the four great oceans? The Buddha gave the answer that the tears shed were truly great, were truly greater. Long, long have you repeatedly experienced the death of a mother. The tears you have shed over the death of a mother while wandering this long samsara, carrying, crying and weeping from being joined with what is displeasing, being separated from what is pleasing, are greater than the waters in the four great oceans. Long have you repeatedly experienced the death of a father, the death of a brother, the death of a sister, the death of a son, the death of a daughter, loss with regard to relatives, loss with regard to wealth, loss with regard to disease. The tears you have shed over loss with regard to disease while wandering this long time, crying, the weeping from being joined with what is displeasing, being separated from what is pleasing, are greater than the waters in the four great oceans. Why is that? From an inconstruable beginning comes birth. A beginning point is not evident, though beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are being reborn repeatedly. Long have you thus experienced stress, experienced pain, experienced loss, swelling the cemeteries enough to become disenchanted with all fabricated things, enough to become dispassionate, enough to be released. Samyukta Nikaya Part 2. This brings us to the question, how enduring is sansar? Is there a beginning and does it end? Is it eternal or not eternal? These self-same questions and others were contemplated by the monk Malunkyaput, and he went to the Buddha with the intention of getting an answer from him, or else he would not continue being a monk. The Buddha refused to give him an answer, but rather declared that he could not see any conceivable point where the beginning was and the ending thereof. He rendered a smile of the time. He rendered a simile of the timelessness of sansar. He turned to the group of monks he was addressing, and he inquired of them which they thought was greater, the mother's milk they had drunk in the course of their long travel in Sansar, or the waters of the four great oceans of the world. He stated that the mother's milk they had drunk was the greater, thus demonstrating the lengthy duration of Sansar. Therefore, it would appear that we have wandered in Sansar from birth to death, from death to rebirth, again and again, so for so great a number of aeons that should we have been conscious of it, we would surely have stopped doing so. He further said to Malun Kaiput why he had not made known the answers to those questions, and why Malun Kaiput have I not made known the answers to your questions, because it is not beneficial and does not belong to the fundamentals of leading a holy life. It does not lead to dispassion and disenchantment, to cessation, to peace and to Nibbana. Thus I have not declared it to you. The Buddha knew many things, but he did not want to burden people with unnecessary knowledge that did not serve to lead them to Nibbana. Why do we wander in Sansar? It is because of not understanding and not penetrating four things that you and I have wandered on for such a long time, which for suffering and cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path leading to cessation of suffering, that is the noble eightfold path. But when noble virtue is understood and penetrated, when concentration noble concentration, noble discernment, noble release is understood and penetrated, then craving for becoming is destroyed. But when noble virtue is understood and penetrated, when noble concentration, noble discernment, noble release is understood and penetrated, then craving for becoming is destroyed. The guide to becoming, that is craving and attachment, is ended. There is now no further becoming. Therefore, the ending of Sansar is the attainment of the state of Nibbana, cessation of all suffering. This is end of this book. There are many things which you may like or not like. I have read this book only for information, but I do believe in many things which you may or may not agree. But let us do one thing, let us study Buddhism and practice Buddhism, practice meditation, practice the four sublime paths which you can see in another videos, and let us gain something from this. I have enjoyed reading this. I hope you must have enjoyed listening this. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim Namaste.